First, I want to thank Ruby Central and all of the Rails organizers and volunteers for having me present this week. First, if you want to follow along with the slides on your device, the slides can be found at the link at the bottom there. Hello, I'm Mina. I use she, her pronouns, and I have been a Rails developer and consultant since 2018. I will be on the RailsConf Slack and also checking Twitter periodically, and I love new friends, so I hope you do reach out to connect. Okay, so now to make sure that you're all in the right place, this talk is called The Little Engines That Could, where we'll help people from 3 different levels of technical experience understand the basics of Rails engines. Now, while brainstorming my proposal for RailsConf this year, I was really drawn to the Explain It Like I'm 5-track next door. And I tried to crowdsource from my coworkers topics that they might want to learn more about. I got a lot of great suggestions. My teammates wanted to learn about things like GraphQL, SQL versus Active Records, and Rails engines. Wait, Rails engines? Okay, just when I thought that Ruby and Rails as a community and framework couldn't get any more delightful, I learned that Rails has something called engines. Now, more than the feeling of satisfaction for my pun-loving heart, I was astounded that I had never heard of this term before. Now, at that point, I had been working in Rails for almost 4 years, and it was the first time that that term had come up. So I decided I was going to learn something new. The philosophy that I stand by and I try to pass along to aspiring speakers is that no matter how basic we think our topic is, there will always be an audience for it. And wherever we are in our careers, by sharing the things that we learn, we're essentially addressing ourselves in the past and others who are where we were. So this talk came about in pretty much exactly this way. In my excitement to learn a little more about the framework that I love, I went digging for information and some hands-on experience. For a community like ours that has pretty comprehensive resources, engines don't get used or talked about as much. And all that is to say, really, I'm not here to make anyone an expert. We need more than a half hour for that to happen. So my goals were to use this presentation as a catalyst to dig into something new and share a summary of my learnings with, well, all of you. So my format today is inspired by a Wired YouTube video series called Explain in 5 Levels of Difficulty, where they bring in experts to talk about some high-level subject in 5 layers of complexity. First to a child, then a teenager, then an undergrad, a grad student, and finally, a colleague. So today, I'm going to introduce Rails engines to people from 3 different technical levels. So level 1 consists of the non-technical members of our software team, or those new to coding. These are our designers, our product and project managers, sales, marketing, etc. Level 2 consists of our early career developers. So these are our apprentices or new developers looking for their first professional roles. They know the very basics and may have built a couple of Rails side projects. Finally, level 3 is where I would have categorized myself. We are the devs who have been using Rails professionally for a few years, but have never worked with engines before. Now, I'll be diving a little bit deeper with each level that we advance. I had a lot of questions when I first started digging into Rails engines, and at the end of this presentation, it is also my hope that you will take away a little clearer understanding, whichever level you identify with. So at level 1, we're going to address what an engine is in a non-technical way, explore some of its benefits and why we might choose to use one. At level 2, we're going to look at what makes an engine unique by comparing it to things that we're familiar with, like gems and plugins. And we'll also touch on some of the a couple of different types of engines. And at level 3, we're going to go over briefly how we get started implementing an engine and discuss some things to look out for when we're testing. Okay, now imagine that we work for a consulting company and collectively, and this company has a sales team that screens potential clients for us. The sales team members don't come from a technical background, but they have worked around developers enough to understand how to ask the questions that are important to us. They inform us one day that we have been asked to build an engine called Critic to handle restaurant reviews by a potential client. Now, before the sales team can proceed with the effort, they asked us to explain what the engine is so they can understand what this client is asking for. Now, one of my favorite exercises is trying to come up with real-life metaphors for technical concepts. So I can explain these concepts in a way that everyone can understand. This is a strategy that I still use when I encounter new concepts right now. Now, to explain Rails engines to our sales team, allow me to introduce you all to the symbiote. Now, the symbiote is a fictional species of alien organism from Marvel Comics. They don't hold really any defined physical forms of their own and requires a host organism to be powerful and viable. Now, the most well-known of the symbiotes is Venom, and it turns out this Marvel anti-hero has a lot in common with Rails engines. First, Rails engines do not operate on their own and requires integration or to be mounted into a host Rails application to function and test. Similarly, the symbiote cannot self-sustain. They need another living organism to host them in order to survive and function properly. So neither Rails engines nor the symbiote can reach their full potentials without their respective hosts. Rails engines, once incorporated into an application, provides that application with additional functionalities it didn't have before. So for example, Device provides our application with the ability to authenticate when the application doesn't implement that on their own. Likewise, when the symbiote and another organism form a bond, the host is enhanced with powers like superhuman strength, speed, agility, and endurance. And most famously, the symbiote bonded to Eddie Brock, turning a down and out reporter into Venom, one of the most powerful characters in the Spider-Man universe. So, both Rails engines and the symbiote enhance their hosts by providing the ability to do something that they couldn't before. Now, a single Rails engine codebase can be used by multiple host applications. Each application incorporates the engine independently and can overwrite parts of it without affecting other applications also using the same engine. Similarly, the symbiote can form bonds with more hosts than just Eddie Brock. They also take on the overall shape of the host that they embody, and Venom is shaped like a humanoid man. When the symbiote bonded with characters from Guardians of the Galaxy, they looked drastically different. So both Rails engines and the symbiote can bond with and be adaptable to an array of different hosts. Okay, so now that our sales team has a little better understanding of the request, they want to know what this potential client might be trying to accomplish with this engine-based design. While Rails engines are reusable, This client might want to package this engine up to share its functionalities between multiple applications or to open source the code for others to use. And because a single engine can be incorporated into multiple applications, they are a good option for sharing reusable code. Rails engine encapsulate related portions of code. This client's Rails application might be getting too big and their developers are having difficulty holding enough context to effectively work in it. Rails engines allow us to reduce the cognitive load required by splitting the system into their own scopes. This way, the developers will only need to understand a small portion of the entire system while working on the code. Rails engines also reduce the scope of tests. This client's test suite for the application might be getting too slow and unruly to maintain, and they want to decrease the spec execution time. And similar to reducing the cognitive load, encapsulating related functionalities in an engine also reduces the runtime and organization of the test suite. By design, since an engine shouldn't rely on any of the behaviors in the host application, its specs should also be able to run in isolation. Now, after this conversation with the sales team, they have learned what a Rails engine is and what values they might provide to our potential client. They now have a high-level understanding needed to further this conversation. Okay, now imagine that our sales team has gone ahead. They have secured the contract to build this engine for this client, and we have also assigned developers to this project. Our team includes an apprentice that we have been mentoring. They know the basics of Rails and have built a couple of side projects with it. But to them, Rails engines sound a lot like a gem or a plugin, but they have also heard it described as a miniature application. Deeply confused, they asked us for clarification. So in the non-technical explanation earlier, we made some comparisons between engines and applications. The Rails guides say that applications are basically supercharged engines because the Rails : application class inherits a lot of its behaviors from Rails : engine. At first glance, they're also very similar in their directory structures as well, with views, controllers, models, and assets. Now, conceptually, the biggest difference between them is that applications can operate independently, while engines cannot. An engine's external dependencies are also listed within its gem spec file rather than a gem file. And once we add the engine into the host application's gem file, we would bundle as usual, telling bundler to parse the engine's gem spec, installing its dependencies alongside those of the host. Now, the ability to reuse an engine's code across multiple applications often gets them compared to gems. Now, a gem is just a fancy term for a packaged Ruby library, meaning that if an engine is packaged up, it can be shared as a gem on public servers. But even though a Rails engine can be distributed like a gem, they will only work within a Rails application, when non-engine gems can be incorporated into any Ruby project, whether it uses Rails or not. So the main difference between any gem and a Rails engine is that gems are any Ruby code, while engines contain Rails entities like models, controllers, views, migrations, and routes. Okay, but aren't plugins also code that can be reused? Well, we've just learned that engines are a subset of special gems. In a similar vein, engines are also a subset of plugins. But I think they're a little more closely related. Both engines and plugins are intended to be used alongside a Rails application to provide additional functionalities. So how do they differ? For this, I had turned to the Rails guides for engines. The documentation includes this line. An engine can be a plugin, and a plugin can be an engine. Okay, so if we think about the geometry rule that all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares, maybe we can rewrite this sentence to make a little more sense. All engines are plugins, but not all plugins are engines. The term plugin is used to describe any isolated units of code that extend or modify the core of a Rails application. Oops. Whereas engines are something more specific. Engines are considered to be full plugins by Rails, but have an application's MVC structure, while plugins in general are meant to be used as model-level code. Rails consider engines to be full plugins because they are bootstrapped using the Rails plugin generator. But in order to tell the generator that we intend to create an engine rather than a generic plugin, we use either the --full or --mountable flag. Now with the full flag, the generator creates what is called a full engine. This type of engine integrates with the host application as if the code for the engine's functionalities are written directly alongside the application's code. They provide new entities to an existing Ruby on Rails application and will be an extension of the host application. With the mountable flag, the generator creates a mountable engine. Mountable engines act more similarly to a mini Rails application that can be mounted into a host at a designated route. These types of engines run in parallel to the host application rather than integrate into them. A mountable engine includes all the features of a full engine plus some additional. They have an isolated namespace, while full engines do not. This means that the host application and the engine can have classes that share the same names, but will not collide with each other because everything in the engine will be namespaced inside a single module. Mountable engines also have asset manifest files, a layout view template, and namespace isolation for routes and the class used for configurations. Now for the apprentice dev on our team, we were able to clear up some of their confusion by explaining the subtle differences and similarities between engines and applications, gems, and plugins. We also looked briefly at the two types of engines, full and mountable, and how they differ from each other. So now that our sales team has secured the project and our apprentice understands what we're trying to accomplish, it's time to build the thing. Now, in the very well-documented world of Ruby on Rails, Rails engines is, I find, surprisingly little talked about. Even though our team includes other experienced Rails developers, none of them have ever implemented an engine before. So they have asked us for some guidance. To get started, we're going to use the plugin generator to bootstrap a mountable engine called Critic. Now, as the generator is working, we're going to see some of the typical output as you do when starting an application. Among the standard parts like controllers and models, we also see that some additional files have been generated. These files illustrate some of the ways that engines differ from applications. Inside of our lib directory, we have a critic.rb. This is the entry point of our engine, and this file will be required when the host application loads its dependencies. And it can be used to configure the engine's external dependencies and loads our engine's configs. Also inside the lib directory, there is a subdirectory named after our engine that contains an engine.rb. This file informs the host application that this dependency is an engine and is used similarly to an application's config file. Now, because we generated Critic as a mountable engine, one parameter is already configured for us. This line declares that the whole engine is to be isolated in the namespace matching our engine's name, critic. And the critic's gem spec contains metadata about our engine and gems upon which it depends. Now, once we include the engine into the host application's gem file, whenever bundle is run, these dependencies will be installed alongside the dependency of the host application. The generator also created a bare bones Rails app inside the test directory for us, which will be used in testing the engine. Now, so far we have talked a lot about entities for a mountable engine being namespaced inside a module, and that this is made possible by the isolate namespace configuration we saw earlier. So when we use the model generator to bootstrap a model inside our engine, it's going to create our review.rb, our new model file, inside a subdirectory called critic under models, and automatically nest our new model class inside of the engine's module. So when testing a Rails engine, a few things did stand out to me and are worth paying attention to. Since an engine cannot operate without an application, inside our test directory, we saw that there's an app created specifically for testing. Our engine is automatically loaded into this testing app, and our tests are run from its environments. This test app environment handles both manual testing in browser, as well as all unit tests and integration tests. Now, if we find it necessary, we can also generate controllers, models, or views in the testing app to use when testing our engine. When making requests to a controller in controller tests, we need to more explicitly tell our test app how to route those requests. For example, if we had a test file for a reviews controller in critic, it might look something like this. So by setting the routes instance variable in the test setup, we are instructing the test app environment to route the requests in this test file to the engine, so that in the index action test below, that GET request will route to the correct index action using the engine's routes rather than the application's routes. And with this setup, the engine's URL helpers will also work as expected. Cool. Now imagine that we built out all of the engine's functionalities. Fast forward in time, and now we're ready to mount this engine into our host application. Well, first, we need to include the engine in the host's gem file. And if we're developing the engine's code right next to the applications, we also want to designate its relative path. Next, we'll designate a route where we would like to mount this engine. This line will mount the engine at /reviews in the application, making it accessible at localhost 3000 /reviews when we're developing locally, for example. Okay. So for the other Rails developers on our team, we've just walked through how to get started with an engine using the plugin generator and how we might test and use a mountable engine. So regardless which level you fall into, I hope that you are able to take away something useful. We went through what engines are, how they differ from other Ruby and Rails features, and the practical aspect of implementing one. Now, of course, there are still so many more questions that I want answered, and we have barely really scratched the surface. I personally think the next step will want to dig deeper into what engines are capable of, when it might be a good time to use one, and what the trade-offs might be. Maybe there'll be a part 2. But as with learning anything new, we have to start with the basics. What I've provided today is a summary of the things that I found most interesting and necessary to getting started. I merely introduced another tool to your Rails toolbox, And it's up to you to decide if it's useful for your task at hand. Thank you. So thank you all so much for choosing this talk. I just want to plug a couple of my friends who are also speaking at this conference. Audrey Slater is talking about TDD with a pirate theme, so check that out on Thursday. And Mercedes Bernard's talk on how to onboard efficiently into a new code base also promises to be good. So also on Thursday. Thanks.